That legislation is what we call in the Senate a compulsory arbitration bill. It requires the Dallas Transit Authority to, by law, compulsory to arbitrate with their employees. This, I think, is an unjust proposal and one that is not necessary because the rights that the transit employees now have are much better than what they had when they were unionized. So we're making an effort to try to defeat this legislation, even though it was reported favorably out of the committee last week. My Republican colleague from Houston and I have discussed it at some length, and some of the Democrat members of the Senate, and we attempt to, or will attempt to, get 11 of us together and unified so that, because the rules, it requires 2/3 vote to bring up the bill, and if we can get 11 to stick together, we can prevent it from being brought up.
Today, here at the Texas Hospital Association meeting here in Dallas, members were told 70 to 80% of the operation costs of their institutions went for salaries. The spiraling cost of operation of their institutions is killing the hospital budget and making the poor sick patient even sicker in the pocketbook. A relatively new method was explored today in the preparation of food in low-cost microwave ovens. 4 dietitians prepared such dishes as seafood Newburg, stuffed cabbage, corn on the cob, and other mouth-watering foods for the 248 people here at this meeting. Ordinarily, this would take 4 to 5 hours, but today it was all accomplished in less than 30 minutes. I talked with hospital administrator Rod Bell about what will happen to the hospitals if we cannot streamline their operations costs.
We're going to be forced by third-party pressures, mostly the federal government, to control costs and to increase our efficiency and avoid waste in both time and materials. I think this is an obligation of the hospitals and the medical profession working jointly.
Now, this, of course, would mean increased taxes, more welfare plans. What can we do to cut costs in the hospital besides in the food line?
We're going to have to learn to automate many things that we're doing now manually. We're going to have to borrow a lot of ideas and innovations from industry. And frankly, we've been slow to adopt new ideas in the health field.
Mr. Evans, we have your letter in which you ask several questions pertaining to the movement of traffic in and out of garages. First, is there anything in the city ordinances which permit cars to use a traffic lane as a waiting lane? Second, you ask, does moving traffic have right-of-way over cars trying to exit from the parking garages? If a uniformed officer is a private salaried employee of the garage facility, is his status the same as when he is on the taxpayer's payroll? Could an individual motorist hire an off-duty uniformed officer to escort him through traffic and expedite his individual movement? To answer your first question, there is no ordinance that pertains to waiting in a traffic lane. The ordinances would be parking ordinances. However, the question here is it more practical to run the motorist off and keep him moving in traffic, or if he is not blocking the full street, is it more practical to allow a few minutes for him to get into the garage? In some cases, the officers do require the traffic to move on. In other cases, if there's no blocking of the street, they find it more practical to allow them to line up. Does traffic have the right-of-way over cars trying to exit from the parking garages? Actually, that does not. This is a question of allocating right-of-way. The officers alternately let people out of the garage and alternately move the traffic on the streets. I'm sure it's as irritating for the person who cannot get out of the garage as it is for the person who may be stopped to allow him out of the garage. A uniformed officer is an officer 24 hours a day, so his status as an officer is the same while he's working in the street for a private concern or whether he's working in an on-duty capacity. Could an individual motorist hire an off-duty officer to escort him through traffic and expedite his individual movement? No, he could not. We're talking in one case about an individual who might have some special privileges, and in the other about a mass of people on the street in cars as opposed to a large group of people in a garage in cars, and you're serving the people as a whole in this capacity.
A 23-year-old Fort Worth man, Johnny Proctor Moore, who was recently indicted for breaking and entering and was wanted for assault with intent to rape and for forgery charges, was apprehended by police this afternoon after a wild chase of up to 80 or 85 miles per hour through busy streets and intersections on Fort Worth's north side. Moore was initially chased by one police car. It was involved in an accident moments after the chase began. A second car, as well as 5 others, finally got into the chase. The car which apprehended him was driven by Officer O.D. Mitchell. Mitchell said that as they reached the curve at 32nd and Ellis Streets, their cars collided, that being his and the one he was chasing. Then he was able finally to stop Moore at the intersection of 33rd and Ellis Streets. The car was occupied not only by Moore, but by 3 women, one of whom says she is his wife, and by 2 very small babies. 2 18-year-old Tarrant County men have been charged with possession of narcotics. The pair are Douglas Smith of Irving and Jimmy Balch of Euless. They were taken into custody for holding what was called seeds from marijuana plants. The Association for Children with Learning Disabilities is meeting in Fort Worth at the Tarrant County Convention Center. Among those speaking today was Dr. Kenneth Beers, one of the top men in the medical team of aerospace medicine at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Dr. Beers, by the way, is one of the medical surgeons who is on duty during the flight of Apollo 9. 2 men have filed for the Fort Worth City Council race. They are Jess M. Johnston, Jr. He was going to run against Harris P. Hoover, who is the incumbent in place 2. And Fred F. Yockstick is also going to run. He is the 3rd to announce for the place which will be vacated by Frank Dunham, Jr. It's been a busy day in Fort Worth. Jerry Taff, Channel 8 News.
Well, basically our educational system at the high school level is based upon a subject-centered curriculum concept about 1850, based on the idea that the solid disciplines are the way that you learn to be educated. But everything we've learned about education suggests that for anything to be important to youth, to be remembered, to have an effect on them, must be relevant to their goals. So I think we're suggesting that for a significant number of youth, perhaps the majority of youth, that if we will take their occupational goal at about age 16 and then develop around this goal the skills they need, the technical knowledge, the work habits, the attitudes, the understandings, the social relationships that we want into a system of education, and then make this available to the youth in terms of his goal, that this can not only be a means of getting a job, but a method of education.